Have you ever had an impossible love? And if life gave you a chance to be with this person, would you take it even knowing that it might hurt others? I'm Mary Tony under pressure because both my family and friends put it in my head that he was perfect for me. But to be honest, for 10 years my heart belonged to another man's Sebastian, my literature teacher. At the time, he dressed in his usual impeccable charcoal gray suit that accentuated his distinguished posture, and a light blue shirt that contrasted with the intense blue of his eyes. Combined with his thin-rimmed glasses, he looked younger. But that wasn't the only reason I, a shy and introverted 18-year-old girl, fell mentally in love with him. Sebastian, for his part, seemed to appreciate my enthusiasm. He complimented me in class, corrected my essays with patience and dedication, and even invited me to participate in an after-school reading group. It was a dream come true for me. I spent more hours with Sebastian than I did with my own family, and the longing continued to grow in me with every word. Every laugh, every casual touch of our hands or any part of our bodies. And yes, I could be very shy, but I was never approved. I knew my body craved Sebastian's attention, because when I was alone, my hands ran over every millimeter of my skin, wanting his hands to guide me until I exploded. However, all my fantasies were shattered when I found out he was married. Marie, this is wrong. He told me after I gave him a poem in which I confessed my feelings for him. It was the end of the semester before vacation, so I urgently needed to make the first approach. "What's wrong, Professor?" I asked him. My cheeks were red from the fear and shame I felt at that moment, feeling so open in front of him. "I'm an adult, I know, but that's not why." Then he took off his glasses and pinched the bridge of his nose. There, I finally saw something I hadn't seen in the previous months, a large gold ring on the ring finger of my right hand. "I'm married," he muttered. I did it last week. Even as the years passed, the memory of that moment felt like a punch to the gut. Even after I dated a few guys and finally settled on Tony, I kept thinking about how Sebastian, with whom I'd lost all contact since graduating from college, went behave. As I stood at the altar, I vowed that I would never think about him again and devote myself to being the perfect wife for Tony. But as I said in the beginning, our relationship was far from perfect. The routine, the stress of work, and the endless bickering eventually put an end to any cordiality that existed between us. Ever since he became my husband, it was like he turned into a different person, becoming aggressive, treating me like the worst scum in the world. I cried at night, looking for comfort, but I knew that even my family or friends couldn't give it to me. I gave up, resigning myself to the life I had to live because of my hasty decisions. So I never imagined that the very life that was hurting me would reward me the way I most wanted it to. That day I received a text message from an unfamiliar number. There was nothing mysterious about it. A simple greeting that I usually ignore like all the others I've received in my time. But the audio that followed made my heart jump out of my chest. "Marie, it's Sebastian. Do you remember me? I'm back in town and wanted to take you out for a cup of coffee if you'd like. I'd love to hear from you and catch up. Tell me when you're free." I didn't know how to react. I felt like a schoolgirl who wants to jump and twirl in the air while her lover writes her a letter. At the same time, I felt my whole body trembling. It was his voice. It was him after many years. I accepted his invitation without a second thought, lying that I would be free that same day. I actually had things to do, but the need to see Sebastian took precedence over everything else. As I was getting dressed, however, my husband came into the room and looked at me curiously. "What's wrong?" I asked him. "Couldn't you dress more decently?" He said with his usual bored expression, "You always look so bad. My friends asked me if I'd been giving you a good scrubbing lately." I tried not to give away the grimace of disgust that appeared on my face after his unnecessary words. "That's exactly how I feel good," I replied, adjusting the collar of my blouse. "Are you going out with your friends?" he asked. I just smiled in response. I didn't want to give details because I didn't know how my husband would react to me dating my former teacher. He knew very well who Sebastian was, thanks to my friends who had kept the topic of my crush alive in university. I quickly went to the address Sebastian had given me. It was the restaurant of a beautiful and luxurious hotel located in the most prestigious area of the city, which spoke very well of its current economic status. I thought I would arrive much earlier than Sebastian, but when I walked into the lobby, I saw that he was already here and enjoying his coffee. His elegant posture was still intact, now accentuated by the slightly gray hair that adorned his hairdo and gave him an even wiser look. But undoubtedly his clothes had changed. He was now wearing fave slacks, a blue shirt, and a gray sweater that accentuated the color of his eyes. It was as if Sebastian had become more casual and relaxed than he had been leading classes at the university. "You look beautiful," he said to me after our greeting. "You were very beautiful before, but you're even more beautiful now." That was enough to make me blush again. It had been a while since a man had last complimented me, especially since in my husband's eyes I wasn't beautiful or anything like that. It made me feel special, but I soon pushed the thought out of I couldn't think that way about a married man, especially if I was also married. During our conversation, it felt like time had stopped. He remained a cultured, intelligent, and erudite man with whom you could talk about almost any topic. I learned that he had retired a year after my graduation and had devoted himself to his work as an editor at a major metropolitan publishing house. For my part, I was shy about telling him about my work experience since I hadn't accomplished anything I had set up to do during my university years. Sebastian encouraged me to do so, however, and over a couple of years, I talked about what had happened to me in my writing career over the years. After finishing the story, I decided to drink the entire glass of beer without pause, which undoubtedly started to make me drug. "I can help you," he said unexpectedly. "Help how?" I asked. "I have an opening at a publishing house that's perfect for you. It's not a writing job, but as an employee, you'll be able to submit several manuscripts for team evaluation. Would you like that?" At that moment, I remembered why it was Sebastian and not someone else. The way he behaved with me, how no one else was so special and attentive to my needs, captured my heart. My eyes filled with tears because I realized that I had tried in vain to forget him. It wasn't working. I still wanted some attention from him. I'd be happy to. I finally said, "Come to my room. I'll show you the documentation." He knew there was something salacious behind the suggestion. And while that wasn't the original intention with which he'd gone to meet me, he wasn't so innocent that he didn't think the possibility existed. He held out his hand to me and I hesitated for a few seconds, but finally accepted. Upon contact, I felt my skin was hot and his was cold, which caused a delightful sensation in my stomach area. I shook my head. I couldn't lust after a married man and I had to respect my husband. But as we walked hand in hand through the hotel in search of his room, I felt ready to forget about. So when we got to the room and he locked it, I turned to face him to see what his true intentions were. "And where are the papers?" "The papers are here," he said, pointing to his suitcase, "but you'll be able to see them in the morning." I smiled sideways. I knew exactly what he wanted because it was something I had been craving for 10 years now. However, in the back of my mind, my resentful teenager wanted to throw a tantrum, remembering how he had rejected me. In the morning, I asked, feigning confusion, "What are we going to do next?" He approached me with a mischievous smile. I realized he was trying to seduce me. Now he whispered, taking me by the waist and pulling me to his body. "Now we're going to do what you've always wanted to do." I started laughing, not removing his hands from my body. "But we're both married, and you said—" I know what I said. He whispered again, but this time in my ear. But I'm not going to let that stop me now. His voice roamed my body until it reached my insides, which were growing wetter with every second spent in Sebastian's arms. He then kissed my earlobe, eliciting a few moans from my mouth, which continued as he moved down to my collarbones. It wasn't long before his hands lifted my body, forcing me into his arms, wrapping my legs around his hips. My arms went around his neck, deepening the kiss and making our tongues play for a while. After a few seconds of this position, I felt my back against the softness of the mattress, and Sebastian's skillful mouth ran down my stomach. He licked my burning skin as my legs came together in search of the friction they needed to climax. But Sebastian's hands wouldn't let me do that. Instead, Sebastian pulled my insides down and suddenly spread my legs, leaving me defenseless before his mercy. With another mischievous smile, he ran his tongue over a particular lump, the nerve endings of which made me scream with pleasure. It was a delightful torment that I couldn't endure for long. His tongue licked every inch of my center and his fingers played with my legs, which were spread wide. As I released myself, I wondered if he wanted me to return the favor. And when I saw him pulling down his pants and showing off his manhood, I knew my dream would come true. And so in the same pose, he slowly lowered himself down, and we both looked into each other's eyes. In private, Sebastian seemed like a different person, because with every thrust, the foulest words came out of his mouth that I couldn't imagine, hearing from a man as elegant and cultured as he was. But I couldn't lie. I was enjoying this. I continued to enjoy the movements of his hips, which knew how and when to enter deeper to make me scream even louder. It was quite a while before we exploded almost simultaneously, laughing and kissing knowingly as we entered each other. It was the first of many times I shared with Sebastian before I made the decision to get a divorce and move to the capital. After months of struggle, I was finally doing what I wanted to do at a job where I felt more fulfilled and away from people like Tony, who gave me nothing. And of course I met Sebastian's wife, a woman who greeted me warmly the day I arrived at the capital before the move. During the week we spent together, she treated me as if I were her daughter, though I didn't realize that when she slept, her husband would come into my room to purr into me all night. Of course, don't think that I am not distressed by this state of affairs, and I am not tormented by my conscience, but I have been unhappy for a very long time, that I would miss such an opportunity after so long. That's my story. Tell me if you have had a similar situation. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel to see more stories like this.